All right, it is 3 o'clock Eastern time, so I might get started with housekeeping stuff so I can just leave the rest of the time for our presenters. Um, I did open up chat to everybody, so you should be able to chat amongst yourselves. You can let us know if you have questions that way as well. But welcome to the Collaborative Science for Restoration series. This is Nick Soberall with the Science Collaborative. Today we're here to talk about a recent transfer project that expanded the Virginia Scientists and Educators Alliance, which is a unique and long-running partnership that has brought together graduate students from the Virginia Institute of Marine Science, VIMS, and other universities with K-12 teachers to turn cutting-edge research into creative, classroom-ready lesson plans. And you'll hear more from the team in just a moment, but as always, before we get started, I just have some quick housekeeping stuff. The National Ocean Research Reserve System is a national network of 30 reserves as shown on this map. This is a NOAA program that works in collaboration with a local place-based partner, either a state agency, university, or nonprofit at each site. The Science Collaborative supports science for estuarine and coastal decision makers by supporting user-driven collaborative research and knowledge exchange activities that address critical coastal management needs identified by the reserves. A quick note on informed consent. The Collaborative Science for Restoration series features project teams supported by the NERRS Science Collaborative program staff and partners. As you can imagine, this webinars are a really valuable opportunity for us to learn as a program. With that in mind, we just wanted to let you know that any insights from the speakers and participants like you can inform how we support work and how we support others in doing collaborative science. So we just want to inform you that anything you share in the chat or the exit survey may be used for program learning and development. Please note that if we do capture anything like a direct quote from you that we'd like to use for learning purposes, we would reach out to you beforehand to seek permission and provide an explanation of its use. All such quotes would only be used anonymously. Last note on how to ask questions. All attendees are muted upon entry. We'll be handling presentation-related questions via Zoom's Q&A feature. You can enter questions for the presenters as they occur to you throughout the webinar, and we'll plan to discuss as many as we can towards the end. You can also verbalize your questions, so if you want to come off mute, just raise your hand to let us know you have a question, and we'll call on you and let you know that we're going to unmute you. Chat is visible to everyone, as I mentioned at the beginning. You can use it to talk amongst yourselves. You can also let us know if you have any questions or if you're having technical problems, and we'll do our best to help you behind the scenes. And that is it, I think, for housekeeping. So I will introduce our speaker for the day, I guess speakers. Sarah Nuss is the director of the Virginia Institute of Marine Sciences Office of Outreach and Engagement. And also joining us today are Allie Hall, a Virginia C graduate student participant, and Kaitlin Gannon, the education coordinator at the Jacques Cousteau Reserve in New Jersey and a collaborator on this project. And I think with that, Sarah is taking over, so I will be here in the background if anybody has technical or other questions.
All right. Thank you all for joining today. We do have two guests that will be joining later on in the presentation, but I just wanted to start off with, what we're hoping to accomplish in this webinar and what we want to share with you. We want to share why we created this program and describe the model to you in case you're thinking about starting something similar. We want to discuss how we were able to expand to other states. And we really thought that it would be valuable for everyone to hear perspectives from some of our partners on this project. And then we're going to end by outlining our next steps and how you might be able to adopt this model where you work. I'm sure that everyone on this webinar knows that there is a lot of research showing that Americans may have a lower scientific literacy than some other countries. And there are a lot of efforts to increase STEM in schools and to increase that knowledge level with the general public. When the next generation science standards were released in 2013, there was a significant need for teaching resources and professional development that would assist teachers in better demonstrating to their students the research practices of scientists and how they could apply critical thinking skills. And we feel like the best source of authentic and current research examples is the scientists themselves. But at the same time, we know that scientists cannot live in isolated bubbles where they conduct their research and they do not connect it to the greater good or to the broader society. So we also realize that there may be some training needed for scientists to help in translating that science to other people. So basically, we want our scientists to be educators because that's a great place for people to learn about science. Additionally, we know that teachers need resources. And in Virginia, we did a needs assessment, and we found that more than 75% of middle school teachers and 60% of high school teachers reported that they were placing an emphasis on the scientific inquiry in the classroom, but they were lacking the resources to do so. So, teachers specifically requested current scientific research as the top thing that they would like to have more resources for and additional training in. So, that's kind of our broad background and justification for this program. So, given that information, we at VIMS, the Virginia Institute of Marine Science, have professional educators that for many years have been providing professional development for teachers, hands-on field experiences for students, creating resources, public outreach events, many different experiences in the world of environmental and marine education. And we modeled this specific Virginia Sea program off of something called SIREN, which was in North Carolina. And SIREN is the Scientists Research and Education Network. This project was created by graduate students in North Carolina who were creating lesson plans based on their research and sharing them with teachers statewide. Lisa and I actually went to one of their events in North Carolina, and we saw the enthusiasm that the teachers had for the lessons and the enthusiasm that the graduate students had for sharing their research with teachers. And we thought this would be a great program to start in Virginia at VIMS. And so we applied for funding to start this program. We actually received funding from the Science Collaborative to start Virginia Sea. And later on, we will talk about our newest funding from the Science Collaborative, which has allowed us to expand to other states. So that's where our Virginia Scientists and Educators Alliance, or Virginia Sea, came from. And this is our very first cohort of students. We had 14 students from Virginia Sea Grant affiliated universities, and these students actually participated from 2015 to 2017. We have since shortened that to one academic year, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And we currently have a cohort of 10 students that are participating in Virginia Sea, and we're currently funding the program internally, just within VIMS. We don't have an external funding source at this time. So that's kind of our background of Virginia Sea. We created two objectives for this program. One, we wanted to train graduate students to communicate their research at a level that most people can understand. So we know that scientists often have to translate their science into a very quick soundbite, and this was a great way to distill it down. Secondly, we wanted to increase research skills that K-12 students were able to practice. So getting current research into the hands of teachers. So for example, some of the lesson plans that were created focused on the process of science itself, such as how to conduct random sampling. So it wasn't necessarily specific to the graduate students' research focus, but more broadly about the scientific process. And we have had a steady demand for our program from both graduate students wanting to participate and teachers wanting to use resources. Every year, we have around 10 students that apply every year, and we're able to take on about 10 students. I was actually in a classroom yesterday, a local high school, and they were planning to do a Virginia Sea activity the next day. And I saw her prepping all of her supplies. So it's still definitely being used by lots of teachers. How does the program work? So for those of you that may be thinking about doing something similar, we wanted to kind of give you an overview of the program. It works on an academic calendar. We open applications for students in July and August, and graduate student training workshops start in late summer, early fall, typically right as the graduate students are coming back to VIMS for the semester. In the fall, they develop their lesson plans, they submit drafts by Thanksgiving. Our education team reviews them for completeness, for clarity, for feasibility in the classroom. And meanwhile, we're recruiting teachers to pilot test the lessons with our students. And I'll just make a point to say that that is one difference between the Siren program. When we started Virginia C, we really felt like we wanted teacher input earlier on. And so all of our lessons are reviewed by a classroom teacher before they're publicized at our event and also put on our website. Pilot testing takes place between January and February, and they give us feedback March 1st. Then the graduate students wrap up their lesson plan, making edits based on the teacher's feedback. And we have a big lesson plan expo, which is open to everyone statewide in mid to late April. And then that's the end of the cycle, and then we'll start again in July the next year. So just to give you a little bit more detail on that process of Virginia C, from the applications, we accept 10 students. Typically, well, they are all from Virginia Sea Grant affiliated universities, but most of them come from VIMS. So VIMS is a graduate school. Well, now we also have undergrads, but it's a graduate school for marine science. And we typically encourage grad students to wait to participate in the workshop until at least their second year so that they have a bit of a more of a handle on their research. And they get through their first year of classes and kind of get in the groove with school. So once they're selected, they attend 2 half-day workshops. The first one is in late August, and the second one is in late September. And in those sessions, we focus on translating scientific research into the lesson plan formats that align with our state. So with Virginia's science standards for K-12 students. And we also incorporate just best practices for science education. We use a lot of previous lesson plans as exemplars to illustrate those practices and to also highlight engaging inquiry-based activities. And we bring in the teachers from the very beginning. So during the very first workshop, we have a panel of teachers that Zoom in and talk to us remotely about what they look for in a lesson plan. And we also give students to brainstorm what elements of their research might be the best focus for their lesson plan. Between those 2 workshops, we ask the students to submit a concept for their lesson, just so we can review it, and we actually decide what Virginia science education standards, like what grade level we feel like the lesson is appropriate for. It doesn't mean that that's finalized at that point, but it helps the students so that they don't have to learn all of the science standards from the beginning, that we can help them with that. And then they come to their second workshop, and we have classroom teachers again join us to meet with the grad students, and we split them up based on grade level. So we might have a elementary school table with an elementary school teacher and our grad students that want to write a K-5 lesson. And they discuss their activity concept, the teachers provide suggestions, and answer any questions that the students might have. So now we've had our 2 workshops, we're moving into lesson plan development. Again, we've said this already, but classroom teachers really value these lesson plans that highlight authentic scientific research and how scientists apply their work to real world problems. So because of that, all of our lessons are inquiry-based. We encourage graduate students to incorporate as much of their actual data and science as is appropriate for the classroom, and also that the graduate student feels comfortable with. So if they haven't published their research and they're a little hesitant about sharing exact numbers, we can figure out ways to model or simulate the results that they're seeing in their research. For the students that are early on in their research, or if their work is too advanced for K-12 audiences, we might guide them to focus on maybe a fundamental science concept, and just to model aspects of their work that represent science and engineering practices. As I mentioned, we build in time for the students to reflect on their research and reflect on different ideas that they might have. They can discuss them with the teachers. As they develop their lessons into the fall, We also provide one-on-one mentoring with our professional educators. And we often have a lot of students that take us up on that, even though they've been in 2 half-day workshops and they've heard from the teacher as they're figuring out their idea even more, they want to discuss that with us. Or they might have multiple ideas. We have a student this year who had like 5 ideas, and we needed to help her narrow it down. And then also to make sure the lessons are realistic for classroom use. We really talk to them about what's feasible in terms of supplies. You can see a picture here of one of our students, Madison Griffin from last year, who designed an activity about histograms and sampling and using beans and things that the teachers can find for inexpensive or for not a lot of money. So we try and really make sure the prep and the cost are feasible for teachers. So to help them figure that out, we actually have the graduate students prepare the materials themselves and test it out. We are still reviewing everything before a teacher pilot tests them, but we do like the students to prepare them and see if it works the way they've envisioned it in their head. And this is where we bring in our teachers. So we partner with local teachers who pilot test the draft lessons. We provide all the materials they need to do the lesson so they don't have to purchase anything. They don't have to make any manipulatives. The only thing that they might have to do is make additional copies depending on how many students are in their class. And teachers have January and February to test the lesson plan so they can do it when it best fits their schedule within those 2 months. And we just ask them to fill out a feedback form by March 1st on both the lesson plan design and how well it worked in the classroom. And this is invaluable to our process. We really like to have as much feedback as possible from the teachers, and then the graduate student will take that and refine their lesson and improve it based on the teacher's recommendations before it is complete. And then the very last part of our process is our lesson plan expo. So you can see one of our students here at her table displaying her lesson plan, which was about sea turtle nesting. We culminate each spring with the lesson plan expo. So graduate students showcase their completed lessons. We open it up to teachers from all over the state. It's free. It's open house style event on a weekday evening. We do promote it widely across the state, and we try and make it fun. We have free pizza and free beer and door prizes for the attendees. And the door prizes are often complete sets of some of the lessons, so materials teachers can take back to their classroom. Each graduate student from the newest cohort, the current cohort, sets up a table, like in the picture here, that features their lesson, complete with materials, visuals, fun props to try and draw in the teachers. And then attendees can walk amongst the tables and talk with the students. And they really like putting a face to the activity so they can go back to their students and say, I met the scientist that does this work at this event, and she talked of so much about her, this cool thing she did with sea turtles. So the teachers really like that part. We also have, in the past few years, been highlighting 5 or 6 of our previous cohorts lessons at this expo because we have so many at this point, and it's been going on for 10 years now. We want to make sure that we're always resharing the ones that maybe were created previously. So yeah, the event is really great. It is a hit with both the teachers and the grad students. It's a great way to build direct connections between the two groups. And the day after the lesson plan expo, all of the new lessons, all the videos, the students make a video introducing themselves. They're all posted on our Virginia C lesson plan collection webpage. So they're available to all the teachers the very next day. And we also put all of our lessons into William and Mary has uh, an online repository called ScholarWorks. So we can post all the lessons there for people to find and access the lessons. So To date, we've had 7 cohorts of students that have participated. So about 76 graduate students that have created 87 lesson plans. We're actually in our 8th cohort right now. All of the lesson plans are online. They're on our website, but they're also on the ScholarWorks page, which is a nice benefit for the students because that page assigns every lesson plan as a DOI, and that gives each student an additional publication that they can put on their CV. The lesson plans have been downloaded more than 26,000 times in 172 countries. And this download is actually a gross underestimate because it's only counting lessons downloaded from ScholarWorks and not those from our website. And our website is where we send people. When we're talking about Virginia C or we're presenting at a conference, we always share our personal page, not the ScholarWorks page. So we know that the downloads are much higher, but that's still a very exciting number, and we're very proud that it has been downloaded so many times and in so many places. And the last thing that we do as educators at VIMS with the lessons is we regularly share these lessons at our state, regional, and national science education conferences. So we have a Virginia Science Teachers Conference, and we always present on 2 of the newest Virginia C lessons. And at the end of this month, we're going to our Mid-Atlantic Marine Educators Conference, and we'll be presenting on 2 Virginia C lessons. So we're sharing the lessons constantly with other groups to get the word out outside of just the teachers that might be able to come to our lesson plan expo. So that is an overview of Virginia C and why we created it. So our next slide, we're actually going to hear from one of our participants, previous participants, Allie Hall, and she's going to talk about her experience doing Virginia C and, you know, any lessons learned that she had from participating. So I'll turn it over to Allie.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm really excited to get to chat about my experience with the VAC program because of those 7 cohorts, I've actually been in 2 of them. And I hope the fact that I have done the program twice is a clear sign that it's not only really beneficial professionally to us as students, but also a genuine pleasure to do and create a lesson at the end of it. The VAC program over the course of both my lesson developments have been really helpful both in my professional and personal life as I'm thinking about my next steps in a career in marine science. I kind of want to hit topics on both of those things, but I'll start with the professional because that's some of the easiest ways I sell my friends on submitting themselves as an applicant for the VAC program here at VIMS. Sarah mentioned that we get to have an extra publication once the lesson plan is posted because it does come with the DOI, and that really helps a student, especially a graduate student in science, buff out your publication section of the CV. But an unexpected, at least to me, consequence is also I'm bumping forward in my CV. I'm someone who wants to always dedicate a career to research. Therefore, my resume or CV is very science focused. And because I have a publication of a lesson plan, I'm actually moving forward my interest in education up into the first couple pages of my CV, where maybe it wouldn't actually be there right at the front where I'm normally going to put things like conference presentations and research articles. And I've actually gotten that feedback from different application committees for proposals and positions that I've applied for the past year or 2, that it's very clear I have a strong interest in education and outreach. And I think one of the reasons is because on my first or second page, we're seeing that publication of the lesson plan. So it's always great to grab another one of those as a grad student, but you truly do get so many skills from the workshops the VAC team puts on. And they're skills that if you are in a rigorous research-based graduate program, you might not be getting in sort of the normal professional development that we get at a place like VIMS, which is incredible for research, but sometimes doesn't include things like how to best communicate your science and how to translate that science to get rid of sort of the technical language that we're used to speaking in as scientists. And I will say, I thought myself in my first cohort, someone who was good at taking scientific jargon or talking about my research and translating it to a lower level, and quickly found out I'm not that great at it. I'm actually just very used to talking to other grad students who just don't study the exact same thing I do. So I've been able to gain a lot of really great professional skills through the workshops that have helped me communicate my science better, not only to K through 12 students who I've been able to interact with through the program, but also to different managers or policymakers or other stakeholders or the public that I do communicate with a lot because of my research. I'm now able to tell them in much easier terms what it is I study. Finally, on the professional side, the VAC program really taught me how to talk about what I study in an engaging way. So I haven't mentioned this, but you might have seen from the slide, I study seagrasses, which are underwater flowering plants. And if you're talking to children or the public, I'm already at a disadvantage because I do not work with animals. And if you compound that with the fact that I tend to study things you can't easily see. So for example, my 2 lessons were about how seagrasses breathe, so looking at things like primary production, or how they store carbon in their sediments. And those aren't exciting sometimes to the public or particularly easily visualized, especially for children. And so through the workshops and thinking about how to take my research and translate it at a K through 12 audience, I've been able to develop techniques for making my science more appealing and more engaging when I'm talking to anyone, really. Because again, I'm battling the fact that I'm not dealing with a really fun looking animal. So these are all a lot of really great professional benefits I've gained from the VAC program. But I also just wanted to mention some of the personal joys I've had going through the program twice, which is the VAC program for VIMS students offers a really easy way to try out marine education in a low stress format. So a lot of us have come either straight from undergrad or still pretty early in our careers as graduate students. And we're not sure exactly what we want to do. We know we have an interest in marine science. There's a lot of open-endedness once we graduate this program. And the VAC sort of experience does allow you to see how do you feel about communicating marine science to different audiences and through education, which has been really great. I, for example, realized I do really love marine education. And while I don't foresee myself targeting the K through 12 audience for the rest of my life, this was the first step for me in marine education. And I've since gone on to sort of continue to hone those skills in other ways, such as learning about education at the college level. And finally, having the VAC program at your university really does help your students write better proposals. So as scientists, a lot of us sometimes struggle, sometimes have a lot of fun, thinking about how we can build sort of these broader impacts of our research that a lot of funding agencies want to see. And when you have a program like VAC hosted within your institution, it makes an easy gateway for you to say how you're going to translate and sort of plug your science into more outreach or education events. And it becomes a self-fulfilling cycle where students want to write that into the grants and proposals they're writing, and then they're going to do that program to fulfill those requirements once they win, because they've made their proposal so much better by writing out clear frameworks for how they're going to have these broader impacts in their research. So I've really enjoyed my time in the VAC program. I love both of my lessons. Through the program, I actually talk to schools every single year. I've been invited back now for about 4 years to give this lesson. A postdoc in my lab is giving this lesson to a school in Virginia Beach just next week, one of the ones I made. So I really love seeing seagrass research get out there, and I'm very proud of the products I've made. I'd be happy to answer any questions at the end or in the chat if you guys have any other inquiries about what it's like to go through this program. So thank you, Sarah.
Thank you so much, Allie. That was great. And yes, Allie will be around. So when we can do questions at the end too, and happy to answer any of those. And I just wanted to mention that our graduate students that have participated in Virginia Sea are often our best marketing strategy. So there's someone in Allie's lab right now that is doing Virginia Sea this year because they got to see it last year because they came to see Allie, well, they heard Allie talking about it as she was working on hers, and then they came to the lesson plan expo. So we actually don't have to advertise very much, which is great that, word just spreads between, at least at VIMS with the students, that we have a lot of people interested in participating. So we can go to our next slide. This was actually a perfect segue into, if you want to do something like Virginia C at your university, how you could do that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our most recent Science Collaborative grant, which was our Virginia C and Partners, which was from 2022 to 2024. And then Kaitlin is going to share a little bit about her experience with that. So the success of Virginia C is not just our lesson plans and the network of students and teachers, which obviously we do think that that is an awesome success, but it is also the strength of our partnerships between NERRS and Sea Grant institutions. So at VIMS, we have educators both from CB NEAR and from Virginia Sea Grant, and we worked collaboratively to create and sustain Virginia Sea since 2015. But through this partnership, interest has spread informally throughout both of these networks. So I know I've mentioned it at NEAR's education coordinator meetings and at our annual meetings, and Lisa has done the same through the Sea Grant Educators Network. And actually in 2018, we did a very similar webinar for the Science Collaborative, and we shared our model, which, we had just gotten through our first full cohort. And we were just sharing so far where we were. And we had a lot of people express interest in the program, including the two partners that we included in this grant proposal. So at the end of the webinar, Kaitlin, who is the education coordinator at the New Jersey NERRS, and Maya McGuire from Florida Sea Grant, they both reached out about information and like, this is really cool. We'd love to start something like this in our states. And I actually wrote down one of the things Kaitlin said when she expressed her interest was, I really want to expand efforts that I'm doing for teachers and what else I can offer them as far as resources. So something similar to Virginia C, where current research could be reflected in lesson plans. And Maya was really interested in sharing with university research labs in hopes to replicate the program using graduate students in Florida. So because of that interest and because of informal discussions, we actually were starting to find out that several Sea Grant offices were starting to adopt or adapt our model at their institution. So Oregon Sea Grant has a very similar program that started based off of Virginia Sea. Michigan Sea Grant has a similar program. So we were hearing that people were starting to take our model and, implement it. This was also around that lovely time where everything was becoming virtual. So we were hosting Virginia Sea online. So we were training the graduate students online. Everything was online. We thought, well, if we can do it online ourselves, it would be potentially an opportunity to expand it to other states. So we proposed this new Virginia Sea model where our project partners would participate in a cycle with us. So the 2022 to 2023 academic year, Kaitlin and Maya actually had someone from Florida Sea Grant, excuse me, attend in her place. They attended a whole year cycle, so they attended the workshops to learn how we hosted the program, and we kept them informed as we walked through all of the program components. So they were participants first. We talked to them about all the things that we do kind of behind the scenes. And then in the second year, they recruited their own graduate students from their own institutions to participate in Virginia Sea and Partners. And so it was a small project. We had a small number of graduate students, but they were able to participate virtually with our VIMS graduate students in the training workshops. And so I'm going to turn it over to Kaitlin to kind of talk about her experience in the Virginia Sea and Partners program, and then we'll wrap up and get into some questions for any of our presenters. So I'll turn it over to Kaitlin.
Great, thank you. Hi everybody, my name is Kaitlin Gannon. I'm the education coordinator at the Jacques Cousteau National Estuarine Research Reserve. And yeah, we wanted to join the VIC program. One, because when I heard about it, it seems like a no-brainer, really. I thought it was a fantastic link between authentic science and education, which is a goal that I always strive to do at the Jacques Cousteau Reserve, and I think we all do as environmental educators in general. And it made sense because, Sarah mentioned the next generation science standards, which New Jersey adopted in 2018. So teachers are already looking for something where they can take authentic science and bring it to their classroom. So that was one thing. And then another thing that happened in New Jersey pretty recently and over the last couple of years specifically is that we have new climate standards in our state. So climate change standards are now across the board in all subject areas. So even more now than ever, teachers are looking for various resources that now incorporate climate and climate change. So we wanted to make these lessons available to teachers, not just so they could meet those standards, but also so students could have meaningful lessons about real relevant, locally relevant science. So they can connect with it, can have that sense of place and connection to their communities and how it might impact them. So we had originally wanted to work with the graduate student group at Rutgers, but that course either changed or something happened where it kind of fell through. So then Sarah and I were talking about, okay, so what graduate students do we work with then in New Jersey, or what graduate students could I potentially collaborate with? And I was thinking about all these different things, and then I think it was at a NERRS annual meeting where Sarah said, why don't you just work with your Margaret A. Davidson research fellow? And I thought, that's a fantastic idea. Let's do that. So the Margaret A. Davidson Fellowship is a 2-year research fellowship within the Reserve Program. And we had, I think at that time, literally just got a new Mad Fellow. We had one previous for 2 terms, which I think was our first one. And I think everybody had one, for the first time. And then, so our Mad Fellow, her name is Kira Fitz. She is a Rutgers research graduate student, and I approached her about this, and she was very much on board. So I had, instead of having a cohort like Sarah had through the VAC program, I had worked with just one graduate student through the MAD Fellowship. And her particular research was looking at Atlantic croaker and their range shifts as a result of climate change. So that was her research. And so she did the program with me. She was so open and cool about like doing all of the different trainings and being really, really involved. She like just dove right in and did it. And so that was really exciting for me. And I think it was really exciting for her too, because she can take her research and turn it into a lesson plan. It's sort of kind of like, it doesn't live on just through her research, but it lives on through education too. So that was really exciting. And so she developed a lesson plan called Survival Challenge: Can Marine Animals Adapt to Climate Change? I won't go into too many details about what her lesson plan actually entails, but it's a lot of creative thinking of how animals can adapt to climate change, basically. It's a lot of imagination, and the teachers who tested it out did really enjoy it. I had there were a few challenges. I think we had some teachers initially, like 4 or 5 teachers that were initially really interested in doing the review and pilot testing it with their students. However, we had only 2 that really piloted it and tested it. The other 2 either the teachers are so busy they weren't able to but they weren't able to pilot it, but they were able to at least review it and provide feedback. So initially we had 4 that were going to pilot it, but it was really only 2 that piloted and gave feedback, and then 2 that just gave feedback, which was fine. It was still all very valuable that we took all of that information. And then we presented the final lesson plan at both my Teachers on the Estuary workshop, my annual tote workshop. And then we also sort of debuted this lesson plan even before my tote workshop at the New Jersey Marine Educators Association Teach at the Beach conference. And so we had about probably over 30 teachers that we did this activity with, and they thoroughly enjoyed it. So, you know, along with the other challenge of having teachers having the time to pilot, you know, it was just probably on me for maybe not giving them either enough time or maybe broadening the net a little bit as far as recruiting teachers. I also wanted to hoped I could have Kira have a little bit more back and forth with the teachers. The teachers kind of sort of went through me a lot, but I think that may have been the nature of the MAD Fellowship program. Kira is often at Rutgers main campus or she's out in the field. So I kind of had to act like that middle person and sort of relaying the teacher feedback. But I think it was still super valuable for her. I know Kira, when she attended the sessions, online sessions on how to write lesson plans, she learned a lot about science communication, but also education methods and teaching methods. So it really, I think, enhanced her science communication skills in general. And she didn't realize how much goes into making a lesson plan and like the teaching theories and all of these things that was very new to her. And she has such a deep appreciation for education now. Not that she didn't, you know, have any before, but it just kind of opened her eyes to the complexity of education. So I think that's all I had to share for right now. Happy to also take questions at the end. So thank you again, Sarah.
Awesome. Thanks, Kaitlin. I did want to just touch on a few things just to kind of piggyback off of what you just said. We also have the same issues, the back and forth with the teachers. We actually have all communication go through us as well. We do have some teachers who are interested in having the graduate students come to their classroom to lead the lesson, and we actually are very diligent about not letting the graduate students do that because we want to see if the lesson plan can be implemented without the person who created it and has it all under the understanding in their mind. We want to see if it makes sense for a teacher to implement it without them. But we also have a lot of teachers who don't necessarily pilot, but just review. And I'm going to get into on my last slide here in a minute. I'm going to get into kind of how we're working around that. We did not have the graduate students from our partners attend the expo because they were from out of state, but we did display their lessons ourselves. So the educators from VIMS did that. In Florida, we had 2 graduate students that participated. And like Kaitlin said, the teachers that reviewed it were from their own state, although we did also align the lessons to the Virginia standards. And you know, Florida had their own struggles. I would love to tell you that, you know, this partnership was wonderful and there were no challenges, but there definitely were more so, I think, for Florida from the perspective that the person that partnered with us, you know, and helped write the grant was not the person that was working directly with the graduate students. And the person that was working with the graduate students went on maternity leave. And so there was a lot of, you know, trying to figure out how to get the students to finish the program, but also make sure the lessons were getting shared at other events like Kaitlin did with her her workshop and her conference. And also Kaitlin brought up a great point that the Margaret A. Davidson Fellows are fellows that work at the NERRS, and we actually have one on as an attendee of the webinar. And in Virginia, I require all of our MAD Fellows to participate in Virginia C. That's part of their education plan or their work plan that they do for their fellowship. And so we're on our 3rd student right now. They are with the reserve for 2 years, and it's a great opportunity for them to learn about distilling their research to a different audience than they normally work with. So it was a great partnership. It brought its own challenges. I think in the end, we came out with 3 really exciting lesson plans from New Jersey and Florida, and that was wonderful. And hopefully, you know, the graduate students learn something and are able to take those skills into the future. Just to kind of wrap up the lessons learned for our program and what our next steps are, we do, you know, conduct this every year, and we slightly refine it every year. We actually also have an attendee of the webinar that helped start Virginia C, and it does look a little bit different than when we first started. One area that we've changed is our graduate student training workshops. We've moved from a full day session to 2 half-day sessions that are spaced apart, which gives the students more time to process and apply what they learned. We've streamlined the content. They don't need to know as much about education theory. They need to know practical things, you know, about crafting the lesson plan, and making sure they have time to brainstorm and think about it in the workshops. Another change that we have done, we've recognized that graduate students often underestimate how much time it takes to prepare the materials for a lesson. We famously share this example every time, but we had a student once whose lesson had 250 clay balls that each had different numbers of beads inside of them. And it was a great idea, but I don't think that they recognized how long it would take the teacher to prep that for each class period. So what we do now is we have the students prepare the materials in advance for the teacher. So that helps the student recognize what is feasible and realistic, but it also helps us because now we have fully prepped kits that we can give to the teachers who are reviewing the lessons. We're trying 2 new adjustments this year. We're adding a teacher workshop in January. So like Kaitlin said, we have had some teachers who have struggled to pilot the lessons. So this workshop is going to give them a chance to walk through it with the graduate students and maybe build more investment and confidence in doing the lesson with their students. So we're gonna see how that works this year. We also are shifting our lesson plan expo to earlier in the afternoon. We have always done it, you know, 5 to 8 p.m., but we're finding that teachers want to come right after school and be done and have some of their evening back. So we think that this small change will make it even easier for teachers to attend. And, you know, we would love to chat with anybody who is interested in the program. If you want to chat about how you could adapt it for your state or talk about the, you know, factors that you might need to consider at your institute to see if it would work, we would love to chat with you. I think on our next slide, we have both the Virginia C website. If you want to check it out, it has all of our previous lessons and information, also mine and Lisa's contact information. But I really appreciate everyone listening and being interested in Virginia C. And at this time, we can take any questions. Allie, Kaitlin, and I are happy to answer any questions you might have. But thank you for attending.
Thanks, folks. You know, it's funny, like I was in all those check-ins with you over years, and I still found like myself hearing stuff new that I hadn't heard before. Maybe that's more a comment on me, but anyway, we're open to questions now, so we have a few minutes. If folks have questions, you can type them in the chat, or you can raise your hand if you want to verbalize one. Just let us know. It's a cozy group today, so don't be shy. You know, you're among friends.
I also should have shared this, but we do pay our graduate students and our teachers as part of this. It's a very small stipend, but if you were wondering, we do pay the graduate students $250. So it's $150 to write their lesson and $100 when they attend the lesson plan expo. And then we pay teachers either $50 or $100 to pilot test the lesson. So
I'm curious if you've heard some stuff from graduate students just like after the fact, because I know you said this has been running you're on your 8th cohort now. I'm just curious, like, do folks like reach out back to you? Because I like the impacts alone from the map that I saw are fairly staggering. Seeing, 26,000 downloads plus across the world in places that, not even just the US, but like well beyond the US. Like, do you ever hear anything from folks about what they're using the lessons for? Just
Yeah,
anecdotally.
I mean, I think some of them use them in the classes that they teach, even if they're at the undergrad level. I do have a story. One of our very first Virginia C students graduated and went into resource management and came back and told us that even though they're not doing anything with education, they're not using their lesson plan specifically, that they do use the skills that they learned to distill their research to. We make them write their lesson plan, at the appropriate grade level, and we tell them that the general public is on average a 7th or 8th grade reading level. So they have to really think about how to explain their research, and that he was able to better explain things to colleagues at his work because of some of the things he learned at the workshop. So that was really great to hear. It's applicable not just for those that are in education.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about like when I was in grad school, thinking like, man, these lessons plans have been really helpful because I remember teaching bio for non-majors in graduate school, thinking like every once in a while there's like a lesson plan that's not quite, I think, getting the point across. So having more options would have been really fun to explore, I think, at that stage. But
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah. Well, you all have our contact information. Feel free. Oh, there's a question in the chat.
Brooke has a question for you.
Any thoughts on the possibilities of working with undergraduate students? That is so VIMS just this fall has accepted undergraduate students. We now have a new coastal and marine science major for the first time. We've had a minor for many years, but we just have the major now. I think that's something that we are considering. I don't know. I wonder if we would have to alter the program slightly to be one semester so it fit within one course that the undergrads would work in. I don't know how that would work yet because I think we're all at them still learning how the new major is working and when they're on campus, but I think it's definitely possible. Um, I think they would have lots of very creative ideas just like our grad students, so I think it would definitely work.
I think that's a really cool idea. I know I personally would have been really interested in that as an undergrad, if for no other reason than to help give direction as an undergrad. Just personally, I don't know. I remember thinking back in those days.
Yeah, and I think, I feel like we're seeing more and more our students, I mean, definitely our graduate students are much more interested in education and outreach than 20 years ago when I started at VIM. So I can only imagine that the undergraduates are the same, that they also would be very interested in giving back to their community and to, teach things to younger students. So I think they probably would be very interested. It's a great idea.
We have just a few minutes left, so maybe I'll just give next steps and wrap up if that's okay. And
Oh,
as
that's
I think
totally
Sarah
fine.
was about to say, you have their contact information if you want to reach out to them after the fact or send it to somebody else who does. Um, Related to that, on the way out of the webinar, you'll see an exit survey pop up. You'll also receive it tomorrow, the same time that the webinar started. So if you have follow-up questions that occur to you after the fact or want to put the presenters in contact with somebody else that might be interested in following up with them, you can feel free to do it that way. The exit survey is anonymous by default. So if you want somebody to follow up with you, you have to provide your email in a comment or something somewhere so we know who to follow up with. The webinar recording will be available in the next day or so. Usually only takes us a day or so to process it, so just check back on our YouTube channel or our website if you don't see it, and if you want to be able to share it with somebody else as well. So with that, I will thank our presenters for their great presentation. As I said, even though I was the program officer for this one, I still feel like I learned something. So well done, Sarah. And everyone, enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.